The past year has been awesome for video games, although not so much for gamers as publishers continually seem ready to throw them under the bus just to make a few extra bucks. But now that the year is nearly over, I thought it might be a good idea to go back and see what all came out. Hey guys, I'm Candle and this is my top 10 games of 2017. Now, before we get started, I'd like to say that in order to qualify for this list, a game has to A, have been released sometime in this calendar year, and B, I have to have played it. So unfortunately, no Final Fantasy 15 or Persona 5. That said, let's get the show on the road, shall we? In at number 10, we have a multi-platform game that I ended up playing on PC because that's where I played the previous one. That I am, of course, talking about Dishonored Death of the Outsider. This is the expandalone, or basically a standalone expansion to Dishonored 2. It takes place afterwards, so if you're not familiar with the story there, I don't want to spoil it for you. But basically, the whole premise of this game is that you play as Billy Lurk, who is the girl on the cover here, and you are trying to go and kill the Outsider, who is this godlike figure in the Dishonored universe. And it was quite a bit of fun. It wasn't as good, I would say, as Dishonored 2 was, but it was still quite a bit of fun. And it was a bit short, but it was also a budget title. I think it was 30 bucks, 40 bucks, not quite sure. And it was only 5 missions. It was still really good, though. The highlight, of course, is the bank heist mission. It was still a really, really fun game to play, and I really enjoyed it. So that's why it's at number 10. However, at number 9, we also have another entry in the long-standing franchise, another multi-platform game, although this time I played it on PS4 because that's where I've been playing the franchise pretty much since the beginning. Like, not entirely since the beginning, but fairly close. Anybody who's followed my old Let's Play videos probably knows what game I'm talking about here. It is, of course, Assassin's Creed Origins. Now, last year there was no Assassin's Creed game. They had been on a yearly release cycle for the better part of a decade. Pretty much ever since Assassin's Creed 2 or Brotherhood, they've been doing one game a year. However, there was no iteration really in the formula for the franchise. It was really getting a bit stale. So after the travesty that was the launch of Unity and then the lackluster sales of Syndicate, Ubisoft decided that they were going to take a year off and try to rework the formula a bit to make Assassin's Creed a bit better. So what they came up with was Origins, and Origins takes place in, as you can probably figure from the pyramid on the cover, it takes place in Egypt. It's not exactly ancient Egypt because the pyramids are already thousands of years old by the time this game takes place, but I would consider it more like classical Egypt or Hellenistic Egypt. This is the era of Cleopatra and Julius Caesar and so on. So it's still really fun. It's very interesting. The biggest changes to the formula were in the combat system rather than anything else. Gone is the almost Arkham style combat where you're bouncing back and forth between enemies and you can pretty much just counter each one and win that way. Now, in place of it, we have something that's much more akin to Dark Souls, where you have a weapon in one hand and a shield in the other, and different buttons control each of those, and it's very much more methodical, much more designed for a one-on-one style of combat, although you do sometimes still have multiple enemies. The map as well is really, really big, and unfortunately the story doesn't take you across the whole map. There are certain areas you will never reach during the story if you just do the story missions. That said, it's still a hell of a lot of fun to go through. It's a beautiful game. My only big gripes with it really is the fact that now the movie is considered canon. There is stuff in here, there are nods to the movie in here that mean that the movie is canon, and I really wish they hadn't done that because the movie was kind of pretty bad. But either way, it's still a phenomenal game, but it only got to number 9 on my list because there are so many much more better games that came out this year. This has really been a wonderful year for games. So in at number 8, we have another PS4 game and another expandalone game as well. We have Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Now, I really enjoyed Uncharted 4 last year when it came out. I really, truly enjoyed it. And I was excited that they were going to do a DLC expansion that didn't focus on Nathan Drake so much, and especially with the way that game ended. And then they ended up expanding that idea to create a standalone game. And again, this is another budget title game. It's only like 30, 40 bucks, something like that. And Nathan Drake does not feature at all in this. I mean, instead you play as Chloe Fraser, I believe is her name, voiced by the talented Australian actress Claudia Black. It's still a lot of fun. Again, it's short. I mean, it's an standalone title, so it's of course going to be a bit short, and it's beautiful, beautiful game. Naughty Dog really does make beautiful games, and it's pretty well written, and it's just some of the things in here are really nice, and I do wish it was a little bit longer. I do wish the puzzles were a little bit more complex and that it was a little bit more on the puzzle solving aspect than straight up combat, but that's more my speed. So it's still a really wonderful game, and I really like the fact that as an Uncharted game without Nathan Drake, it still works, and it proves that the franchise can have legs without the series protagonist that we've come to know and love. But anyways, that was number 8, and in at number 7 is the game that pretty much dominated my March. Yes. Back in March, Nintendo released a new system, and along with it came Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, looking back on it, I'm not as much of a fan of this game as I was when it came out. That's why it's so low on the list. It's really only kind of middling point. But it's still a wonderful game. The map, despite not being as big as some other open world maps out there, feels a hell of a lot bigger. And I think it might be because there's more space between certain things. My biggest gripes with this game, though, were the fact that there's no real big dungeons in the game. You only have the 4 divine beasts, and those are pretty short. And then you have 120 shrines, which are all each basically like one puzzle room. That's it. One puzzle room or one combat room, and that's it. There are other challenges spread throughout the world. Most notable in my mind was Eventide Isle, which I never actually beat. But that's one where basically you wash up on a deserted island with nothing. No clothes, no weapons, nothing. It's all taken from you. And you have to pretty much start back, progression-wise, back where the game started, and figure out how to survive this island and complete the challenges there. And then once you do, and you get the reward for that, then you get everything back. But still, it was a hell of a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed this game. My other real big gripe is that the story just wasn't there. It's very, very stripped back. I think partially because of the open world nature of the game. Open world games tend to not really do very well in the story department. I mean, Assassin's Creed Origins also did not do very well in that department either. But still, it was a lot of fun. So that was my number 7. In at number 6, we have another multi-platform game. There are a lot of these, always. But again, I played it on PC, mostly because it's a first-person game, and I tend to prefer to play those on PC. There are some exceptions, but I tend to prefer playing them on PC because mouse and keyboard just trumps a controller every time in terms of precision and so on with first-person perspectives. And I am talking about 2017's Prey. Now, this is different from 2006's Prey. It's not related at all, despite the fact that Bethesda bought the rights to that Prey. It's not related at all. They have nothing to do with each other aside from sharing a name. It's still a lot of fun, though. This is much more in the vein of games like the original Thief and Deus Ex and System Shock and things like that, where it's more of an interactive simulation, and you're lost on a deserted space station, and there's these monsters running around killing people, and it's really a lot of fun, and it has a lot of environmental puzzle solving and stuff like that, and it was a lot of fun. I can't say much more than that. In at number 5, we have the other big Switch release of the year. We have Super Mario Odyssey. Now, this game is a huge blast to play, and it really is fun. Nintendo really knocked it out of the park again. It's not quite as far up there with me as Super Mario 64, but I think that might be partially because of nostalgia, just the fact that Super Mario 64 was something I played as a kid, and it's just way up there because of that. But Super Mario Odyssey is still a hell of a lot of fun to play. It's awesome. It really is. I'm almost speechless trying to figure out what to say about this game. It's really, really fun. Just running around, collecting moons instead of power stars. Having Cappy here, being able to throw him and bounce on him and capture all the monsters and everything to use their special abilities and so on. It's a lot of fun. It really is. So that is Super Mario Odyssey. That was my number 5. So in at number 4 is a game I was not able to get a physical copy of, which sucked for me. I really, really wanted to buy this physically, but unfortunately the only physical copies they made were collector's editions, and I did not see that anywhere in a store. I didn't pre-order it. I didn't see it anywhere in a store until well after I'd already gotten the game. And I'll put a little graphic up here showing you what it is, but I'm talking, of course, about Sonic Mania. Now, I played this on PC. I wanted to play it on Switch, but when I couldn't track down a physical copy, I ended up getting it off Steam instead. I was like, if I'm going to download it, I may as well do it on PC rather than on Switch. So, anyways, this game was a hell of a lot of fun. It is Sonic at his best in 2D. It's got that classic Genesis aesthetic. It has remixed levels from the original Genesis trilogy plus Knuckles, and it's got some original levels as well. It's just a huge blast to play. It's a lot of fun. It really is. If you have ever played or enjoyed a Sonic game, or if you've ever played or enjoyed 2D platformer, I can't recommend Sonic Mania enough. In at number 3 is another PS4 exclusive. It's an 11-year-old game, so I'm kind of sort of cheating on this, but it works because the version of this game that it's based off of never made it to the West originally. I am talking about Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age. Now, this is a remaster of Final Fantasy XII, but it's not a remaster of the same version that made it to the West. This is a remaster of the Zodiac International Job System version that was later released in Japan, 6 months after the American release of the original game. And it's a lot of fun. It is. It's good to be able to play a Final Fantasy game on console again, beyond Final Fantasy 15, which was also a really good game. But this one, and you can see I have the limited Steelbook edition. I love Steelbook covers. It's awesome. But this one changes the balance from the original game because it introduces jobs, where there are a set of 12 jobs throughout the game, and you can put up to 2 on one character, and it really helps streamline the license board, because back when I played the original on PS2, I never beat it. And I think the biggest reason why was because I kept trying to make all my characters fill out as much of the license board as possible, which, because they all use the same license board, meant they all were exactly the same. So there wasn't really enough variety there, not enough strategy there for me, and I ended up not being able to finish the game. But with this remaster on PS4, I was able to beat the game. Finally, after 11 years, I beat Final Fantasy XII, and it's a really good story. It's much more on the geopolitical aspect than Final Fantasy traditionally is, but it's still wonderful. And it's part of the Evil East Alliance as well, which includes all of the Final Fantasy Tactics games and Vagrant stories. So it all takes place in this one world in different points of the timeline and so on. So that was number 3, and we come down to the last 2 games, and oh boy, these two games are pretty good. Now, in at number 2 is another game I bought digitally, again because I could not find a physical release of the game. I prefer getting physical copies, and I could have bought this one physical had I bought it on a different system, but I really, really wanted to play it on PC because it's in first person. I'm talking, of course, about Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, known in Japan as Biohazard 7 Resident Evil. Yeah, funnily enough, it's really an interesting story about what's going on with that. The original game in the franchise, Resident Evil, was known as Biohazard in Japan. That's what it was released as. And the reason why it became Resident Evil in the West was because they couldn't get the rights to the Biohazard name. I think there was a band that was using it or something, so they couldn't get the trademark for Biohazard, so they ended up calling it Resident Evil because it takes place in an evil residence. Now, pretty much every game since then had not taken place in an evil residence, in an evil house or anything, so it didn't quite make sense moving forward, but the Japanese games were still called Biohazard. So finally, when you have a Resident Evil game that's set in a big dilapidated mansion again, of course they're going to call it Resident Evil. Now, it also has to deal with biochemical weapons and so on like that, bioweapons, which is, of course, a mainstay of the Resident Evil franchise. So the subtitle for this one ended up becoming Biohazard. And of course, because of all that symmetry and everything, they could just flip everything for the Japanese release, so it became Biohazard 7 Resident Evil. Now, this game is stunning. The reason why I wanted to play it on PC is because it's a first-person shooter, basically. It's in first person, it's a horror game, and you have a gun. So it's a first-person shooter. I could have played this on PS4. I almost wish I did, and there's one huge reason for it. One reason I was extremely excited for this game when it first came out. The game is fully playable in VR. Now, I didn't understand this at the time, but it's only playable in VR on PlayStation. The VR mode is exclusive to PSVR for a year. It's a timed exclusive for up to a year after launch. So hopefully, since that year is coming up soon, I mean, this game released all the way back in, what, January, I think? That's how awesome this year's been. But this game released that far away, and we're coming up on January again. I'm hoping that they'll release a patch for the PC version so that I can play it in VR and PC, because I have an Oculus Rift. I don't have Oculus Touch yet, but I have an Oculus Rift, so I can play it in VR, and I really, really want to do that in VR. But unfortunately, I can't yet. It was still a really fun game. I really enjoyed the puzzle aspects of the combat. Was nice. It was so good to finally be in a first-person horror game and be able to fight back. You guys don't know how awesome that is, because every game like Outlast or whatever is scary for the first couple hours, but towards the end of it, my fight or flight reflex has flipped from flight to fight. But those games don't give you that option. Your only choice is to run and hide in those games. So it's so good to actually be able to fight back in one of these. So, and it proves that first-person horror can still work when you have combat. So it's so good. Anyways, that was it for number 2. Now we have the number 1 game for 2017. This was my top game of the year. And it is another PS4 exclusive. This has been a stellar year for PlayStation. I am talking about Horizon Zero Dawn. And it blows my mind that Guerrilla Games, the people that did this game, made it, because their biggest experience has been the Killzone franchise, which is first-person shooters. And then they make a third-person open-world sandbox type game, and it's really awesome. And I mean, what more can you love? You are a redheaded girl playing or shooting at mechanical robotic dinosaurs with a bow. I mean, that's awesome. That is beyond insane. And at first blush, it doesn't sound like it makes sense. I mean, how can you take down a robot with a bow? But the more I think about it, the more I realize it's actually pretty ingenious how they solve that problem in the lore, because the arrowheads are, which you craft in the game, you craft all of your ammo in the game. The arrowheads come from, the metal for the arrowheads come from the remains of these other robots. And you might be asking, well, how did they kill the first ones in order to get those very first arrowheads? The thing was, they didn't have to. Some of these robots will take down other robots. So, and that actually even just happens out of the blue. You'll come across remains of robots and so on, and it's awesome. It's a beautiful game. It's wonderful. I cannot wait to get a PS4 Pro and a 4K HDR TV in order to see just how beautiful this game is, because it was made for native 4K HDR resolution, and I've been playing it on a standard 1080p screen. I mean, that's what my TV is right now. So it's an amazing game. Anyways, that was my top 10 games of the year. That's it for the list. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Next week will be my new quarterly goals to start 2018 and a look back at how I did for the last 3 months. After that, I'm not sure, but new blog posts will go up on the 15th of every month. You can find a link to the blog in the description down below, and please leave any comments and suggestions you might have. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.